Before moving to Sweden, I thought I was prepared for the big changes. A new language, a new country, starting life over again. But strangely, some of the things that felt hardest to adjust to were actually very small everyday things. Things nobody really warns you about beforehand. At first, many of those things felt confusing to me, sometimes even uncomfortable. Not because people were rude or Sweden was bad, but because the logic behind many everyday situations was completely different from what I was used to. And it honestly took me much longer to understand some of those things than learning the language itself. One thing nobody really prepared me for was how dark and quiet Sweden can feel sometimes. I came from much busier environments, first Beijing, then years in London, so I was very used to movement all the time. People outside, shops open late, noise and street lights everywhere. But then I moved to a very small town in Sweden, and my house was basically in the middle of the woods. No lights, no shops, no neighbors within 100 meters. You honestly had a better chance of seeing a wild boar than another person sometimes. And it was December when I first arrived. I left the house in the morning when it was still completely dark outside, and around 3 p.m. it was dark again. And at the beginning, the silence honestly felt a bit unsettling to me. My mom even got scared when she came to visit. She kept saying, "Where are all the people?" But after a while, I slowly started realizing that many people here genuinely value calmness, quietness, and personal space very deeply. And strangely enough, after years of constantly being surrounded by noise and pressure, part of me started appreciating that quieter rhythm too. Another thing that made me feel embarrassed afterwards was not understanding the Swedish queuing system. I remember walking to the local tax office, Skatteverket, during my first few days in Sweden. It was very quiet, and I didn't see any queue. So I thought, wow, one of the benefits of living in a small town. So I walked straight up to the desk and started speaking English to the lady there. She smiled politely and said, "Just wait here for a second, I'll help you soon." And she did help me very quickly. So I didn't think much about it at the time. But later did I realize I had completely ignored the ticket machine. Apparently, you're supposed to take a number first, a curl up, and wait for your turn to appear on the screen. I felt so embarrassed afterwards, almost like I had accidentally confirmed every stereotype about Chinese people not queuing properly. For a while, the whole system actually felt a bit impersonal to me. Because sometimes it's kind of nice standing in a line, waiting and chatting with strangers. But gradually, I started understanding why the system works so well here. It removes a lot of uncertainty and social friction. People don't need to compete for attention, interrupt each other, or guess whose turn it is. Everyone quietly knows I'll be helped when my number comes. And the longer I lived here, the more I realized how many systems in Sweden are designed to feel orderly, fair, low pressure for everyone involved. Another thing that surprised me was how people often pay for exactly what they've eaten or drunk when eating out together. In some cultures, one person pays this time, someone else pays next time, or people simply split everything evenly. So at first, it honestly felt very calculated to me. Like, are we really counting every krona? But over time though, I realized it often creates something else instead: clarity and independence. There is less awkwardness around money, less pressure to pay someone back later, and people can simply enjoy the meal without feeling financially indebted to each other afterwards. That actually helped me understand another cultural value I've noticed in Sweden. People often try quite hard not to create unnecessary pressure or obligation for others. And once I started seeing it from that perspective, it made much more sense to me. Another thing that took me by surprise was how different gender expectations felt socially. Coming from both Chinese culture and years in the UK, I was much more used to certain gentleman behaviors, things like carrying heavier bags, opening doors, or automatically helping women physically. So when those things happened less often here, I sometimes interpret it as distance, coldness, or lack of attentiveness. But eventually, I realized it probably came from a completely different way of thinking. The expectation here feels less like women need to be taken care of, and more like everyone should be equally independent. And to be honest, that definitely took me a while to adapt to. And part of me still isn't 100% used to it even now. Not because one way is completely right or wrong, but because different cultures express care, politeness, respect differently. And I think living abroad slowly teaches you that many things you once thought simply normal are actually deeply cultural. To me, that became one of the most interesting parts about living in another country long term. At the beginning, you naturally interpret everything through the logic and expectations you grew up with. So when people behave differently, it can initially feel strange, awkward, or even wrong sometimes. But slowly you start realizing that different societies are often built around completely different ideas of respect, fairness, independence, personal space, and equality. And honestly, that's probably one of the most valuable parts of living abroad. Not necessarily changing who you are completely, but becoming more open to different ways of thinking and living. And looking back now, a lot of things that confused me at first eventually started making a lot more sense to me. And some of them even became things I truly appreciate now. So I'm curious, what cultural differences surprised you the most after moving to another country?